Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is the first of 3 scheduled appearances and statements by me announcing the 3 themes of our campaign this year for the mayor's race in Columbus. Those 3 themes are very simple. They're the kind of things which are just common sense to the residents of Columbus, and that is safety, schools, and service. Today we're going to focus on the first of those, which is safety, but let me say a couple of words first about schools and service. Schools, Columbus Public Schools, are not providing the kind of quality education that every resident deserves for their children in this city. With a dropout rate of nearly 50% and 51 out of 185 schools on either academic emergency or academic watch, we need changes in Columbus Public Schools, and we'll be announcing those changes and proposals later. Services. Thank God it's 80 degrees today, otherwise we'd have snow piled up on the streets and your driveways still wouldn't be plowed. Just an example of the kind of services that we're not getting in Columbus. Basic services that everyone expects and deserves for the tax dollars which they're providing to this city. But let me talk about the first and perhaps most important priority in Columbus, and that is safety. The crime picture in Columbus is ominous. We're heading towards the top of the statistical charts, and those are statistical charts that we don't want to be on. For example, over the last 2 years, Columbus has ranked #1 in per capita rapes of every city over 500,000 in the United States. Certainly not a statistic that we want to be topping the nation in for this despicable crime. Arson. We've ranged between #1 and #3 in arson rates over the last 3 years, according to the FBI. Only Detroit and Dallas have topped us in arson rates in the last 3 years. Homicides. Although our homicide rate is marginally down from last year, the reality is over the last several years we've been averaging double the per capita homicide rate of New York City. That's why citizens of Columbus don't feel safe in their homes and safe in their areas. We've had home invasions in a lot of different sectors in Columbus, whether it's on the south end, on the west side, and other sectors of town. Home invasions are not an acceptable type of crime in this city. None of this crime is acceptable in this city. People in Columbus, residents of Columbus, need to feel safe. They need to feel like their home is protected, that we have an adequate number of police officers on the street and an adequate fire service. Let me tell you a little bit about how I've learned in the last few weeks how these crime problems are affecting our city. In German Village, for example, perhaps the premier residential community in the city of Columbus, I've learned that the residents down there are talking about forming a special improvement district. In other words, taxing themselves over and above everything else they're already paying in taxes to hire special duty police officers to patrol German Village. Well, that's not acceptable. First of all, we shouldn't have a wealthy area in the community able to hire additional police officers and not provide the same level of high quality, efficient service to everyone else. Everyone in this city should feel free from crime, whether it's an impact on black crime or any other crime anywhere in the city. We need to reduce crime, and we're only going to do that by putting more officers on the street. Let me tell you some other things I've heard as I've gone around Columbus. On the east side, the Near East Side, people are frightened of crime. Whether there is a good and positive contribution in the King Lincoln area for the building of a theater, that's fine, but you need to reduce crime and improve the neighborhood there so people will feel safe to attend theater events in that area. On the north side in Clintonville, I had a neighborhood leader tell me the other night that one of the things that really frightened him is because we're going to lose over 400 police officers, experienced people, in the next 4 years, that Columbus is about to become the Wild West in terms of crime because there won't be enough experienced police officers on the street. None of this is complicated. It results from 2 things. One is a lack of planning and foresight by the Coleman administration to make sure that we have enough new police officers on the street. And another piece of common sense that all of us should know and understand and embrace, and that is simply we're at the end of the baby boom generation, and it's going to have a direct impact on our safety forces. Many of our officers and the police officers and firemen and women are at the age where they're set to retire. We know over the next 4 years, a minimum of 400 police officers are going to retire. The Coleman administration has not planned to replace those officers in a timely manner, and frankly, we're about to the point where it's going to be impossible to have enough police on the street in this city by the time this next administration rolls around, which hopefully is going to be a Bill Todd administration and not a Coleman administration, because we'll bend every effort and make safety a high priority for the residents of the city of Columbus. Mike Coleman has known for 8 years how old the police force was. The graying of the police force and fire service is no mystery, it's not a surprise, and nothing's been done. On the fire service side, there hasn't been a new fire recruit in nearly 3 years. On the police side, the Coleman administration has added an average of about 10 new police officers a year. How in the world are they going to face a situation where nearly 400 police officers are going to need to be replaced in the next 4 years? They don't have a plan for it. They have no idea of what to do, and frankly, they're so bereft of understanding of what this problem is, they haven't begun to even bring it to the public's attention to how important it is to recruit new police officers. Well, what do we need to do? Very simple, ladies and gentlemen. We have to make safety, the safety of Columbus residents, the top priority of city government. We need to make sure that there are an adequate number of police officers on the streets. We need to make sure that they have adequate equipment, that they're fully funded in their equipment budget for new vehicles. Last week I rode in a police cruiser that had over 150,000 miles on it, and quite frankly, it should have been replaced a long time ago. Just an example of how aged our police fleet is. On the fire side, more than half of our fire trucks were here when Greg Lasheka was mayor nearly 8 years ago. They should have been replaced years ago. No excuses, no excuses are good enough. You may ask, how can we afford to do these things? I will tell you point blank, we can't afford not to. Safety of Columbus residents is what's going to keep the neighborhood strong and vital. It's going to keep residents in Columbus, and those are exactly the people we can't afford to lose. Let me close by giving an example of misplaced priorities of the Coleman administration, and one that the Columbus Dispatch brought to everyone's attention just yesterday, and that is $3 million has been spent in the last several years to put flowers in front of downtown condos. I'm as big a proponent of downtown development as anybody, but that $3 million would have put 71 more police officers on the streets of this city. I'm telling you right now, we need to have the police officers on the streets because no one is going to feel safe enough to enjoy those flowers otherwise. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Last week you put out some information about debates and wanting to debate Mayor Coleman 8 times. Do you realistically expect him to accept 8 debates, or are you hoping to maybe find a middle ground compromise?
I would love to have 8 debates because I think that what we did when we talked about debates was we identified important issues in the community. For example, safety issues. I think since there's been no debate and no real discussion of safety issues for over 8 years, that he could find an hour to talk about safety. Schools. I really think that given the dropout rate in the Columbus public schools, given the fact that we have so many schools that are in academic emergency or academic watch, that we need to have a focused debate on education in this community and determine whether it isn't time to establish a blue ribbon commission to link together City Hall and the school board to jointly govern the city schools in a manner to specifically be determined later. The reality is the 19th century system of splitting school governance from city governance is outmoded today. And most major cities have recognized that and done something about it. We've not had that happen in Columbus. We need to start that debate now. We can't have another school year go by and fail this many children. Neighborhoods. We've got to have neighborhood debates. Many of you have been to the neighborhoods in this community and you know how frustrated people are, whether it's the east side, the west side, the north side, or the south side. They're unhappy, they're frustrated, and for good reason. They're not getting the level of service, the level of commitment, and the dialogue they want with City Hall. Those are the kinds of things that we need to start doing. So do I think he should do it? Yes. Do I think he will? I don't know. If not, I'm going to get a cardboard cutout prepared, life-size of Mike, and I'll have him stand next to me, and we'll talk about these issues, whether he's there or not.
Bill, The last 8 years, the city's had some pretty bad budget problems with revenue not keeping up with demand for services. In the last 8 years, do you think, are there things that the city shouldn't have done in order to hire more police? Or
Bob, I think that what needs to happen and should have happened over the last 8 years is that long-term issues such as the graying of the police force and the fire service should have been recognized a number of years ago. And people should have known that we were going to be confronting this problem here in the beginning of the 21st century with retiring police officers and retiring firemen. We cannot now have the lead time available to us that we should have had in order to resolve that issue. So even in lean budget years, no, I don't think you can shortchange the city safety services. You know, I'll give you an example. Several years ago, they bought 41 garbage trucks and 6 fire trucks. I think the priority should have been reversed there.
the mayor and his staff always say that cities like Cleveland, Detroit were laying off police during the years. That Columbus at least held its own during those years. What's your response to that?
Bob, I think it's important when you look at safety, particularly police, that it's a combination of population and size, actual geographic size, which somewhat makes Columbus unique. And one of the very disturbing statistics here in Columbus is the average cruiser district, where an actual police car has to patrol, is almost 11 square miles. The usual districts in cities of this size are about 2 square miles. If any of you have been following the crime series on Channel 4, you'll notice that they've been talking about it by cruiser districts. And I'm here to tell you that one of the reasons cruiser districts are experiencing so much crime is they're too large. We need more cruisers on the street, more police on the street, so that it is not just population, it's population and size. And from that standpoint, I think we could all go blind looking at numbers, comparing one city to another. I think we have to look at the realities of the situation here. I'm going to be the first one to tell you, I think that given the lack of resources that our fire service and police officers have had, they've done a remarkable job of meeting the needs of the community. But the fact is the community has grown both in size and in population in the last 8 years, and the safety forces have not grown to keep pace with those forces. So because there's more population, because there's a bigger city, we need to have more individuals on the street. The other thing, and again, this is a planning function that should have happened lean years or not lean budget years. There has been no comprehensive plan introduced in the last 8 years to redeploy our forces in an efficient way. And what I mean by that is, for example, the cruisers that patrol the whole 18th precinct, which is pretty much the north central area in Columbus, all leave a substation at Morrison Carl Road. They go all the way up into Delaware County and Polaris Parkway. It takes them at rush hour over a half an hour to get from their substation up to their cruiser district. So they're spending an hour just in transit time going back and forth. Redeployment of those officers in a more efficient way would help this problem. The failure to plan and to think about that has exacerbated the problem. Same thing on the east side of the 14th precinct, which is over in the Reynoldsburg, Pickerington area. It's a 20-minute ride to a lot of the cruiser districts from the substation. Well, what that means is they're just transit time. It's sort of like commuting time to get to their districts. A failure to have an efficient plan for deployment of the forces, and it's something that administration should have been paying for in order to provide the service to the police force. Same thing with the fire service. If it weren't for the fact we have very good mutual aid pacts with a lot of the communities across the northern tier here in Columbus, what we would know is that our fire services are stretched to the breaking point across the northern part of the city, as they are in many other parts of the city. Many years ago, station number 2 downtown here was the station that was the busiest fire station in Columbus. They had the most runs, and it was one of the more difficult places. That's changed during the Coleman administration to make now the busiest fire station in Columbus is at Maple Canyon and 161. But what hasn't changed is the deployment of basic equipment and personnel. So you don't have the people where you need them when you need them. We are stretching the safety forces to the breaking point. We can't afford to do that. It's sort of like delaying maintenance on your car. You keep delay, and ultimately you're going to have a breakdown. We are approaching breakdown in some of these areas, and we can't delay any longer.
So doing away with flowers would hire 71 police. How would you get the other 329?
Well, one thing that I think, a very simple thing, again, common sense. An experienced police officer with 20 plus years on the force has a basic salary and benefits package that's somewhere in the $61,000 to $65,000 area right now. A new officer comes in at $40,000. Remember, we're not talking about growing the force by 400 or 500, but recruiting enough officers to meet the needs because of all the retirees and other attrition, and modestly growing the force in the next 4 years. There should be more than adequate play in the budget by the loss of these experienced officers who, once they retire, are going to flip over into the retirement fund, the Ohio Police and Firemen's Retirement Fund, and out of the active service. So for every 2 officers that retire that were experienced, we should be able to hire 3 without increasing the budget at all. Problem now is, because of the lack of planning, there is almost no way to get enough police recruits to the academy in time to get them trained on the streets and experienced enough to be able to do the job for the city of Columbus. It's a tremendous failure of planning, a tremendous failure on the part of the administration to not recognize this problem. And again, it was only common sense that was going to happen. Any other questions? If not, I'll let you all go enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. And thank you so much for coming.